Welcome to the Entrepreneur Stories podcast. Jonathan Herps is your host. He is a strategic advisor, coach, and mentor to entrepreneurial founders, business owners, and CEOs. In this podcast, he chats with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies.
Hi there, it's Jonathan Herps again. Welcome back to my podcast, Entrepreneur Stories of Scaling Up. This is episode number 113, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Ryan Kevelighan today, who's the director and co-owner of 1Medical. And I'm apologising to Ryan in advance. I'm working him up at I think it's 5 a.m. in the morning in Dubai. So if he's looking a bit disheveled, that's my fault. Ryan, welcome.
Yeah, hi Jonathan. How's it going? Again,
Yeah,
apologies. I didn't realise that video would be involved in this, so I'm fresh out of bed and unshowered, and I don't even have a shirt with me that would be appropriate. So apologies.
It's all good fun. It's all good fun. So listen, let's just sort of jump straight into it. Why don't you tell us a bit about your entrepreneurial journey, just a short story, and a bit about 1Medical, please.
Yes, certainly. I've said this on a few other conversations of late, but I'm what I would call a true career recruiter. So I left university in 2006, and like most people, fell into recruitment by hook or by crook.
I did that.
Yeah. It's a common pathway, it seems. So I went straight into recruitment and did 3 years in the UK market in a pharmaceutical engineering type sector. So we predominantly were working with companies like the big pharma, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, those type people. After 3 years in the UK market, I had the opportunity to move to Australia here back end of 2009. Gladly took that opportunity and then transferred across to Australia and transferred markets away from what I'd been doing in the UK into the crazy world of medical recruitment, locum doctor recruitment. The short version of the last 14 years in Australia has been in 2010, I joined what was a subsidiary of a UK company in Australia, and when they were at startup stage, and we took that business through the entire growth phases of the typical things that a recruitment company would go through, starting off very small with 3 people. And in 2015, 5 years later, it was acquired by a larger UK company that was listed in the UK, and then went through the usual earn-out type periods and exit. So that was 2015 to 2018. It was probably running at about 50 people when we were acquired in 2015. So we went from 5 people to 50 people in that period of 5 years. Probably went from being unheard of in the market in Australia to being one of the dominant players, if not the lead player in Australia. And then subsequently, when I left in 2018, I was overseeing both the Australian and New Zealand operations. So there's probably in total just under about 70 staff directly involved in those 2 entities. Had a year out, partially by choice, partly not by choice, due to the joys of restrictive covenants. And then 2019 joined back together with some of the guys that we had previously worked together with and created 1Medical. 1Medical was actually created in 2018 by Ben Lepke. He left the previous business before myself, and he was able to get started in that field at an earlier date while I waited out my time. And we've been on the same journey again with 1Medical. So it's now officially five and a bit years old. I've only been there for just over 4 years because of the previously mentioned timeout. So we're now running at 24 people in Australia, and we've got 5 people in Ireland, and then we've got various outsourced people in different countries. So I think the total number of group, including direct employees and outsourced, is running at about 36, 37 people. Very fortunate to have had quite a lot of success despite the huge opportunities but huge challenges that COVID gave everybody, never mind a healthcare business. So that's a whole other story in itself, that whole COVID journey, providing doctors during that period. And now we're sort of, I suppose we're probably in the upper end of the mid-table in the market now, sort of working our way back to where we previously were.
I mean, congratulations. It's growing any business to that number of team members is hard. I mean, that's what I spend my time coaching clients on. And so you're looking specifically at doctors, is that right?
Yeah, we specifically focus on doctors. Some people will have heard me say this a million times before, but I'll say it again. Recruitment is very diverse. There's a huge spectrum from one end of the scale at the lower paid, more potentially, administration, blue collar type industries, all the way across to the other end of the spectrum, which might be the higher paid, more traditional white collar and tech type industries. But then medical recruitment just sits in a bubble on its own at the end. It really doesn't follow or respond to the normal parameters that normal recruitment sectors would follow. There's a lot of comments that go around that. But for example, we advertise for doctors. They predominantly don't apply for positions. They don't need to apply. They're in a huge abundance of work in their sector. So the thing within it as well, though, is for people that aren't in it, doctor recruitment is quite close to, for example, nursing recruitment, but again, it's totally different. So there are some companies out there that do place doctors and nurses and allied health practitioners, those type of things. But even within those businesses, there'll be very different defined business units within those companies. They're not blended together. There's very few, if any, people out there that are simultaneously, as an individual, placing both doctors and nurses into hospitals or clinics.
It's really interesting. There is, I'm just looking up. So we're interview number 113 now. Call it about interview 50. I interviewed a lady called Zara Lord from a company called UPage. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I know the company, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to go, and it'd be interesting for you to go and have a look at that, because she was an intensive care nurse, and pretty much just before COVID, branched out to do a similar thing, as you say, different doctors versus intensive care nurses. And it's a really interesting story that the journey she went through as well. So I'm looking forward to the next questions.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of war stories from the COVID period. It was a good experience, but we all went through it together. That's the one thing about COVID, is no matter who you are and what you were doing, in some way, shape, or form, your life was impacted by COVID. It was one of the few things in the history of us all that has actually pulled everyone together on a shared challenge and a shared journey, so to speak.
Absolutely. So let's jump in a bit further. So if you had to start from scratch again, what aspects of personal development or leadership development would you prioritize now?
I mean, if I had to start again, it's probably similar to what I'm trying to do now. Is I think there's a lot to be said for a routine. I don't fully practice what I preach, but I have had some periods in my life where I've been very successful in getting into a routine, and traveling really does not help with that routine. But so I'm not practicing it very well this year, but there has been times when, just the simple basics, getting into getting the right amount of sleep, making sure that you exercise every day, whatever that may or may not be, keeping the certain more social aspects of life, I think, under control more. It really does help to having that sort of right mindset that you need to be able to put your full amount of energy and effort into running a business every day, because it is very draining. So I think it's one of those things that is talked about a lot, but it's often not talked about so much in the professional development type of circles, because people, obviously, when they think professional development, start thinking about different actual skills. Whereas I think there's a lot to be said for a routine, because it's the sort of the foundation for everything that flows from there. And certainly stuff that's down the more psychological type things and mindsets. Did a lot of that in the earlier parts of my career, and then probably not as much of it in more recent years. And it's something that I think we need to, well, me personally and the others that we work with, need to look at getting back into, because similar to the foundations of a routine, everything that you're dealing with in sales or training or development, there is that psychology foundation where everything flows from, assessing the type of person you are, the type of person that you're dealing with, the type of person that you're trying to sell to, the type of person that you're trying to manage. All of those type of things have that sort of starting point.
It's interesting to say that. There's some really good points you made there. Yeah, the routine, absolutely. And I'm crap at it, even though I'm a coach. I coach my clients. And the way I do it, I mean, I'm forced into aspects of it because I've got a 9 and a 10-year-old. So, they force you into certain behaviours. You know, like every morning I get them up, get them to school, and and then I have a personal trainer to look after me, the fat boy, to try and keep me fit, and that's part of my routine is by having someone who keeps me accountable. And the same thing this afternoon. I'll finish at 4 o'clock today because I'm coaching my daughter's OzTag team, and so I'm forced into some routines, which is great.
Well, so some of those things are better than just trying to go to the gym, for example, because when you're going to the gym, it's very easy to just go, I can't be bothered today, I won't bother going. When you're doing, like you say, OzTag, or if you're playing tennis or whatever it might be, you've got another person involved that you can't let down, or
it's in your diary, isn't it?
Harder to let down.
Yeah. And the other one, interesting enough, I was speaking to the daughter of a dear friend recently, and a couple of weeks ago, and she's applying for university, and she said to me, Jonathan, I want to get into marketing and business. What degrees would you recommend? And I said, well, if I was doing it again now, and if I wanted to get into that area, I think I'd be doing a psychology based on user experience, and I'd be doing a data science combined degree. So the user experience and psychology is so important, but how to apply that to data to build on user experience, and particularly now we've got AI that's just taking over. I think I totally agree with you. I think everything comes back to that, some element of the psychology piece.
Yeah, no, definitely. There was someone recently asked me about the university piece, and there is a growing trend of sort of people that think that, would you actually advise that somebody goes to university in the first place if they don't actually need a hard skill set?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I use the example of my MBA, which I did in 1991, and it didn't even mention the internet. But having said that, my law degree, I use every week, and even
everything hinges on the law. Legislation is one of my favourite talking points. But again, a law degree is one of the traditional, red brick style, blue chip style qualifications. Law, medicine, engineering, that type of thing.
Yeah, but if you're going to go and become an entrepreneur, I'd be going and finding someone like me and going and look at everything I put online and listen, there's 113 now of these that are going to tell you how to be an entrepreneur. You could get an MBA in being an entrepreneur just listening to this interview series.
Indeed.
So tell me, when you've got a significant employee base, what do you look for in employees, and how do you build a positive culture around them?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what type of person we're looking for. If we're looking for a sort of a more junior entry-level person, or whether we're looking for somebody more senior and experienced. I mean, with it being recruitment, drive and ambition is so critical, even more so than other field sets, because it's not an easy career path. It's the only form of selling that is truly selling a moving target. That moving target has its own mind, its own desires, its own set of legs and mouth and brain, etc. So I mean, having that level of drive to be able to deal with that complexity of selling in two directions simultaneously, continuously, is quite critical. So it really isn't, in some cases, for the faint-hearted. Medical recruitment then has its other entire level of complexities, whereby you're essentially supplying staff to a hospital, which the hospital is running on. So indirectly, you are running hospitals with their staffing requirements. It puts a whole nother level of pressure onto things. And for the people that haven't got previous recruitment experience, one of the things we do try and look for is, in some cases, some kind of achievement outside of the workplace. Sporting achievements, for example, can be a very good indicator of what the ultimate person's personality is like behind the scenes. If they have achieved something in a sporting field, even just while at school, for example, it shows a level of dedication. Getting up every day at X time to go training for 4 days a week is a good foundation for having that type of drive and tenacity to push through. So yeah, I mean, it's so varied. If they have got experience, then obviously we're assessing that experience and the type of market that they've worked in. But if they haven't, then we're assessing everything. And no matter what some people say, a lot of it comes down to a gut decision, a gut feel. And you never really know what somebody's going to be like until you've actually worked with them for a period of time, no matter how comprehensive your onboarding, so your interview and selection processes, we feel anyway. I'm sure some people might disagree because there's some very comprehensive assessment processes out there, but we'll probably grow to try and increase our assessment process more in line with the larger company as we increase. But at this stage, it's a lot of gut feel that goes into these things.
I agree to a point. There's a great book called Top Grading. It was written by the people guy behind Jack Welch at GE in the halcyon days. But one of the things he talks about is threat of reference check, and asking candidates, what would your ex-boss, how would they rate you? And a series of questions here, which I find help me and my gut, if that makes sense. What do you reckon has been your biggest learning since you've been a business owner?
Biggest learning? I suppose it's, I've never been one to be complacent. I'm probably more on the I think pessimistic might be a strong word, but certainly realistic scale of things. I'm always sort of thinking as to what can go wrong? How's it going to go wrong? What can I do to try and avoid it going wrong? Which, inherently probably makes me sound like a bit of a worrier, but it's a very different world now to when we started doing this 15, 20 years ago. I think one of the biggest learnings is that need to keep learning. Still I've been in Australia now for 14 years, fundamentally doing the same industry for 14 years. And I'm still every week finding out something that I didn't know, and having to learn from that. So I think it's that need to keep learning. And as I say, it's a very different, I'm a product of the 80s, educated in the 90s, started in the workforce in the 2000s. It's a very different place now, just in that last 16, 17, 18 years since I entered the workplace. And I suspect it's going to get dramatically different over the next 5, 10, 15 years, if not even more so. So I think it's the learning, the biggest learning is the need to keep learning and keep trying to sort of visualize where you're heading and what you can do to be proactive about it as best you can, and try and avoid the pitfalls that invariably pop up.
Yeah, no, so you just look at the changes in the last year with ChatGPT, one app alone.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally changed the way I do my business, run my business, and do my business. And it's as we go back to my MBA, I didn't mention the internet. But that's me showing my age, of course.
Yeah. No, it's true though. It's very true. I mean, if you look at some of the advancements that we've had in recent years, I mean, I don't know which way they're going to go and whether some of them are going to go full circle, but hopefully the skill set of actually being somebody that can communicate with people and that sort of whole category of soft skills that people have always put quite a high regard on, hopefully they become more important as opposed to less important. And that's what a lot of commentators seem to be saying, and hopefully it's the case, because a lot of us make our income out of those soft skills.
I have no doubt at all. It's and they're going to become more and more important in my view. The technology is an accelerator, but if you can't, as you say, communicate and communicate effectively. So tell me, going forward, what is your main challenge in your business now, and what do you think the key challenges are going to be for you moving forwards?
I mean, staff are always a challenge, because without good staff, you've got nothing. And getting good staff's difficult. Keeping them engaged, motivated, entertained, etc., is also challenging. In our specific business, there is the underlying theme of there is a doctor shortage and a doctor misdistribution, not just in Australia, but in all the countries that I keep an eye on, specifically New Zealand, UK, Ireland, etc., as those sort of 4 main markets that we keep an eye on. So the shortage of doctors, it keeps us in business because we're good at finding doctors. But there's limits to, if they're not there to be found, no excellent recruiter is going to find them if they're not physically there. So that's a challenge that we're working with. So focusing on the internal staff and then focusing on what we do to find the external doctors is the 2 big challenges that we consistently face. But the one that's become more prevalent in the last couple of years, which is more concerning, is the increasing involvement of federal and state governments and legislation within our space and the wider business community. Because it's, you can do things yourself personally to try and improve, your staff, find more doctors, etc. But you can't really do much in the eyes of legislation, and bit by bit, more and more legislation keeps coming in, which is putting increased pressure, stress, admin costs, and it has the risk to legislate you out of business as well. We feel that the legislation that's been coming in, while it may not be personally targeted specifically at recruitment or at one sector or anything, it's enveloping and encapsulating and capturing people inadvertently that maybe the legislators never intended on actually being captured by it. But when you're trying to run a business that is 100% compliant and follows all relevant applicable legislation, it's becoming increasingly challenging and expensive.
Yeah, I'm finding that across the board. And one of my large clients, but I've got an NDIS client who has about 250 staff, and they're saying the same thing every day, and particularly now with the legislative changes. So tell me, when you think of the word successful, who comes to mind and why?
Yeah, I was thinking about this before this conversation. I mean, there's quite a lot of, this is going to sound evasive, this question, but there's quite a lot of, or this answer, sorry, there's quite a lot of very successful recruitment owners, managers, directors, etc. out there. And I think I find all of them admirable and successful in different ways. One of the things I've heard recently, though, it's good to actually hear people saying this is a bit more realistic around the situation, is there's people that are now quite openly saying they wouldn't fancy doing this again in the current time, and they wouldn't fancy doing it again on their own. So some of these guys that are maybe a couple of generations earlier that were very, very successful in that time period, be it the 80s, the 90s, etc., they're actually being honest and upfront now and saying, I wouldn't fancy starting over again in this current economy and marketplace that we're in, or doing it on my own as opposed to having a business partner. I find quite a lot of them it's warming to have your sort of concerns validated, if that makes sense. It's not just you overthinking and panicking around these things. It's actually, well, that guy's got a lot of experience, or she's got a lot of experience, and she's actually validating what I'm saying.
It's an interesting point you make about co-founders. It's one of those, trying to do it by yourself is really hard, as you know.
Yeah, just even have the right people to talk to. I've been very fortunate that I've worked with my business partner for many years now, and we have very similar sort of views and thought processes on things, which I think helps. We hear a lot of challenging, difficult stories about where people have had challenges because they don't get on with their co-founders, or they have very different views, which then continually slows them down. In the previous comments that we were talking about there, we were talking about how the world has changed. I think it's even more so important to have those good relationships and those good business partners working together these days. Yeah,
no, I agree. So tell me, are you a reader, podcasts, any you'd recommend to other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I'm probably more of a podcast listener these days, because it's just easier when you're out and about. You can be getting your steps up, you can be on the commute, you can be doing whatever and just listen to a podcast. I think as well, just hearing the voice of the person saying it as well is quite often potentially more powerful than reading a book or an article where you don't hear the person's their accent, their style, it's like anything. You send an email to somebody and you send it in a very nice mindset and you write it in a certain way, but then the person who receives it can potentially read it in a negative context. So hearing a podcast gives a lot more context to the actual content being spoken about, I feel. I listen to a few. It makes me sound sad, but I do listen to quite a lot of the recruitment ones, because again, I feel that the recruitment market is very different to normal business. It's also quite different to normal sales. So I just get more relevance out of listening to recruitment-based podcasts. So yeah, a couple of the sort of more notable ones that I listen to. There's what's the chap called? He's called Pete Watson, who does the Mint Recruitment podcast. I can't remember exactly what it's called now. There's Sean Anderson that does the Hoxo Academy podcast. So they're regularly putting out an interview with a recruitment leader or owner or manager every week. So that's quite a good source of getting a flavour of what's going on in other recruitment sectors. And sometimes they do medical connected or healthcare connected people as well. So it's a good source of getting some validation and ideas and comfort from what's going on in other areas.
Great, thank you. Last question. Any last piece of advice or parting words to other entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs out there?
I suppose piece of advice. I mean, again, it's a cliche one that's used quite often, but the ultimate thing that a business lives and dies by, as everybody knows, is often cash flow. So it's very critical to get the finance process and the cash flow process in place and keep an eye on it like a hawk at all times, which is annoying because everything flows from the financials, but ultimately everything flows from staff. So I'd rather say that the most important thing is your staff, and it sort of is, but it's in a very close interchangeable position with the most important thing being your financial processes. So it's all starting from the outset from the finance and the staff and going from there. I mean, one of the things I'd probably say, this is a podcast about scaling and growth predominantly. I mean, I'd advise people to go for it, but at the same time as going for it, don't hesitate to stall your growth or pause your growth if you feel that you need to. We've taken the opportunity on a couple of occasions to semi-slow down our growth on purpose because the level of growth that we've gone through has been concerning. Sorry, concerning is a strong word. It's not felt comfortable because of not having certain things in line to support that growth. So we've taken what we feel a positive decision on a couple of occasions to slow down that growth, to take stock, to get a few things in place before then pushing on again to the next level. Last year, we were on the AFR's Fast 100 starters list. And this year we've graduated onto the Fast 100 list. After you meet a certain time frame where you're no longer classed as a new business, you can no longer qualify for the fast starters. So we were fortunate we did qualify for that, and now we qualified for the established business list. So I don't think we'll be on that list next year because we are taking the opportunity to actually slow our growth a little bit. But again, that doesn't bother us. It's just one of those things. But we'd much rather grow safely and sustainably and get to the next stage intact.
That's a very good point, Ryan. Scaling it sucks cash, and it's spot on. If you don't watch that, you can easily grow yourself into oblivion. So it's a really good piece of advice.
Well, it sucks cash, but it impacts everything else as well. Like if you've got a team of 20 people and 10 of them are established and doing well, and then you're trying to focus your time and efforts on the other 10 people to develop them and get them to the next stage, if you're just continually adding people into that mix, like there's limits to what you can do. And it also creates a situation where your problems can be masked by success in other areas. So don't worry about that. We'll fix that at a later date because look how amazing we're doing over here. And then the disparity comes into the equation. Yeah. So yeah, there's a number of reasons why it's sometimes better not just to go for growth at all costs.
What a great note to finish on. Ryan, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Much appreciated.
And
thanks for
once again, my apologies getting up at 5 a.m. or whatever it is in Dubai.
No, that's okay. And again, apologies for my appearance, and hopefully it's not too offensive for people.
Not an issue at all, and you certainly made up for it with the content. So I really appreciate it.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again. Cheers. Bye.
Let me just stop that. That was great.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you watch/listen. It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the learning gets. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in entrepreneur stories of scaling up. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to admin@scaleupgrowth.co. Put "be a guest" in the subject line and tell me a little about yourself. If you want to gauge where your business growth potential is and identify where the biggest opportunities in your business lie or where the key needs that you need to concentrate on right now are, take our assessment where you will receive personalized advice for improvement. It's quick and free. Go to scaleupgrowth.scoreapp.com. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, I love coaching and get the best outcomes that way. Send me an email at jonathan@scaleupgrowth.co and put one-to-one in the heading. Tell me a bit about your business and let's see how we can apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time for more great learnings from a scaling entrepreneur.